A note, all of our meetings will be live streamed. Members can join via Zoom, but there will be no voting privileges if you're joined via Zoom. We're going to begin with our organization of the committee, and I recognize Senator Branning for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to move to elect Senator Tyler McConnell as Secretary of the committee.
Y'all heard the motion. Since we don't have any freshmen on the committee, we thought it best for the person with the newest born to be the secretary. and he's not here, so all in favor of election? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that passes. Recognize Senator Branning for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I move to adopt a quorum of 4 members, a majority of the committee, as sufficient quorum to proceed with the business.
Y'all heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes. And recognize Senator Branning.
Thank you. Final motion is to adopt the rules of the Senate as the committee rules of procedure, with the exception that a motion to reconsider may be disposed of on the same day it is entered.
Thank you. And y'all heard the motion. Same as every other committee. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you all. Today we have a speaker from Bureau of Buildings, Glenn Kornbrecht. He's going to talk with us about available space and anything else he has information-wise. And I'd also like to just recognize we have Liz Welch here as well. Thank you for joining us this morning. Okay.
Thank you all for having me. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for DFA. I have responsibilities for the Office of Capital Facilities, the Bureau of Building and Surplus Property. So if it's in a building, it's come across my desk at some point. So I provide a little information for the committee generally in this PowerPoint presentation. You should have a hard copy. First, a little bit of what DFA has in terms of holdings ourselves. The Capitol Complex, which is primarily your state office buildings. There's 40 facilities totaling almost 3.5 million square feet of space with a replacement value of over $1.1 billion. We also, as I said, deal with the surplus property, and there's some other DFA buildings which are owned by DFA, but not necessarily operated by DFA. That would be your Craft Center, your Children's Museum, Sports Hall of Fame, Mississippi Arts and Entertainment, and a couple of buildings at Stennis. Focusing in on the Capitol Complex in Jackson, we have 18 office buildings, 5 parking garages, 2 central mechanical plants, a couple of museums, the Governor's Mansion, all 3 branches of government, a record center, and facilities. I looked at the state office buildings in particular in the Tri-County area of what we own and what we lease. The Capitol Complex, those are the buildings administered and operated by Capitol Facilities. There's a listing of all the buildings by square footage. There's just over 1.7 million square feet that we operate of office space. Other state agencies operate their own buildings, and those are listed in the Tri-County area, just under 1 million of that. And then the next figure is the leased areas in the Tri-County area by county, just over 1 million square feet at a cost of $14 million a year. Of the lease space, there's 3 leases that make up 51% of that, which is the DHS, CPS, and Department of Revenue leases. So overall, we own about 72% of our office space and lease about 28%. And those are some figures as far as the percentages on the major leases that we have. The half of it is those 3 leases, and the other half is about 45 leases. So the average lease size of other than those big three are in the 10,000 to 20,000 square foot range. One of the things that we've done, I think the legislature has had some interest in efficiency on leasing and building occupancy. And a few things that we've done since that interest. We updated our state leasing manual in 2017. That was a major update that both increased the competitiveness of our leasing process, as well as adopting stricter office space standards as square feet per person. Our new standard currently is about 225 to 250 square foot per person, which is still fairly generous compared to private sector. But we did a study of a few of our buildings finished in 2020 and found that most of our state buildings exceeded even that generous square footage by some 40% or more. So we've been getting to work dealing with three things. One, we've got a lot of deferred maintenance in our state buildings. Our office buildings are no exception. But as we're dealing with that square footage, we're not only renovating it, we're making it more efficient energy-wise and significantly more efficient space-wise. So in the same space that we're currently operating in heating and cooling, we have targeted that we could probably take on 500 additional occupants in our existing buildings at essentially a negligible increase in operational annual costs other than the capital improvements to do so. We've accomplished a good bit of this activity already. We've got several projects underway. I've summarized and essentially just translating roughly those 500 occupants to lease space for them is about $2.5 million a year. So that's not an insubstantial annual return on your investment. And as I said, we have to renovate these buildings regardless. These are state assets. And we just every 20 years or so, you need to do some major renovations. I've listed a number of projects that we have completed that are underway, some significant gains in occupancy. We've added 38 people already to the Wolf Oak building and can take on another 60 with renovations. We've now renovated 2/3 of the Robert E. Lee building and have increased that occupancy by 79 occupants, and we have more to go. The 660 building is about to undergo major renovations. We'll be increasing the occupancy there. And the War Memorial is finally going to see some actual occupancy. It's going to house our Mississippi Veterans Affairs, and that's 36 people that weren't in that building before. And additionally, we've upgraded and restored the auditorium and increased our AV packages. All this increasing the density does require more parking. That's, I think you've noticed over the last several years, the legislature has given us authority to acquire several parcels of property. We acquired the Sun and Sand lot, the Wright and Ferguson, and most recently the what's we call the North 40 lot, which is the lot directly west of the Wright and Ferguson. We do have enough parking to accommodate this increase in density. So we're ready to move forward with this. Again, we've been moving forward with it, and we've got several more projects in our future items there that we are suggesting over the next 5 years of our capital request to fund that and execute those savings. I know threw a lot of numbers at you, so I'm more than happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you. Questions by committee members? Do you have data that shows, say, the average cost of ownership per square foot versus the average cost of leasing the state currently has? And would that include capital expenditures over a course of time?
We can develop those numbers based on the way that the state works, as the capital budget is typically separate from the operational budget. On an operational basis, it costs us about $8 to $9 a square foot to operate. And capital costs, we've referenced national standards, should be 1.5% to 2.5% of the replacement value of structures. So this puts us all in at less than what we can, or approximately equal to what we can lease for these days. The lease rates are depressed in Jackson. The occupancy rates are fairly high. Again, that's not just Mississippi, that's a lot, countrywide. There's a lot more office space than there's needed. And one of the challenges we've had for our property owners in Jackson is the rates, the private sector rates don't really offer enough room to be making the capital improvements in those structures. It costs a lot to operate and maintain a building, but we can get you some summary information on that.
Thank you. Senator Norwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at, do you have excess space in any of the buildings where there will be opportunities for co-locating agencies?
In the leased space, are you talking about, or the owned space?
Well, I mean, if it's leased or owned, I guess.
Okay, so most of the space that we have that's, I guess, vacant or available in state-owned buildings is currently being renovated in order to maximize our occupancy. So right now, it's either under construction or it's not suitable for a tenant. So as we are renovating these, there are more opportunities to unload some folks out of private leases. As far as the lease space, most of our leases have a provision if there's excess space that the agency can reduce their lease to match the current need. So we don't typically sublease an agency's lease to another agency because that's the agency that's in charge of that lease.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Glenn. If I remember it correctly, DFA can move a state agency from privately leased space into state-owned space, with the exception of the Department of Revenue, where that lease specifically excluded that standard clause. Is that right?
The larger leases for that much square footage in the private sector, typically a landlord is not willing to build to suit, so to speak, for a tenant without a commitment of some time. So almost all of our other leases do have that caveat that you can move into. And the recently renegotiated Child Protection Services lease does have that clause. So that has the ability to be moved into state space if it's available. We just don't have a spare 180,000 square feet.
And you and I worked on this for many years. The authority to enter into, for an agency to enter into a private lease, they have some general guidelines and y'all provide some general oversight, but each agency independently has pretty broad discretion to go where they want to go. Isn't that right?
That's true. We did add some provisions that they cannot exclude Jackson in the Tri-County area. That was a new feature of our 2017 manual upgrades. And they do have to, on the smaller leases, it's based on price. There's not really an option to consider other factors except price unless it's over 20,000 square feet, I believe.
And so you don't have the authority now, if you wanted to go rent a big building and fill it up with agencies that are currently having lots of little leases scattered out all over the area, you couldn't do that because the state wouldn't own that building, and the
Correct.
leasing authority for each agency rests with that individual agency.
That's exactly.
So if you wanted to combine and say, look, I've got these 10 agencies, they're each leasing 10,000 square feet, that's 100,000 square feet. I bet I can get it down to 80,000 square feet. I'm going to go get one big lease for 80,000 square feet, and we're going to put those 10 agencies in there. You couldn't do that.
Correct.
So that's but we could, and obviously these leases they're contracts and you can't break contracts, but you don't have, there's no central agency with the authority to deal with this in a strategic way, other than doing exactly what you are doing with state-owned buildings.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Senator Sparks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the chairman had asked as far as a comparison of cost of buildings that we would own and maintain versus buildings we would lease. I'm assuming a major factor in some of the pricing in the open market is that they have to pay taxes where I assume the state of Mississippi, are we paying taxes to Hines County or the city of Jackson on these buildings? Obviously, that would need to be factored into the pricing. Do I understand that correctly? And I apologize for asking the question
No,
from behind you or in
certainly.
front of you.
The state-owned buildings, obviously, we do not pay we do not pay property tax. When we lease, we don't specifically pay for the property tax, but I'm sure it's included in the rent that's available.
Right, and that was kind of the point of my question, is if we're renting from a private person, they don't get tax abatements. So even where maintenance on some of our older buildings that are owned in Hines County or the city of Jackson may have mitigation issues, we still, in the long run, are getting a better deal as it relates to the market.
Right. Generally speaking, right now in the market as it stands.
Thank you.
Senator Blunt.
Just real quick, because I know there's been some confusion about this in the past. You do pay a water bill.
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's one
thank
of
you.
our largest expenses.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for joining us today. All right, that wraps up our meeting. Do I have a motion? For it, all in favor?